Thank you so much for coming and joining me for this talk. I'm very excited to be back and to share with you guys what I've been doing. So I'm doing a program called CAP Corps. It's short for Capuchin Franciscan Corps, and it's led by Capuchin Franciscan friars in Washington, D.C. So I'd say like the two main components of my life in CAP Corps are direct service and community life. So I'm living in intentional community with 4 amazing volunteers. 3 of them are here with me. And so basically what intentional community means for us, I'll get into like a lot more of what I found that it means on a deeper level, but like practically day to day, we eat dinner together and pray together every night. And we share a small communal budget. So we share a car and a house and all of our money. And so, yeah, I kind of was thrown into that with strangers, and it's been a really incredible experience. And then I work full-time as a case manager at an organization called Miriam's Kitchen, which offers social services to the homeless population of Washington, D.C. And that job is also like very dynamic. Every day, every engagement is very different. But the goal of our case management is to provide people at the end of the day with stable, permanent housing. But yeah, it's really just meeting them where they're at and trying to be like a listening ear, or to provide connections to mental or physical health, or ID services, stuff like that. So I wanted to first kind of tell you guys how I got to CAP Corps. I was not at all expecting to do a year of service. It was, I think, March or April of my senior year. I was like very unsure about what I wanted to do, and I was kind of doing like what I think is like the classic Colgate thing of like I was planning on like moving to New York City with my friends and doing a paralegal job while applying to law school, and just like doing that whole thing. And I didn't really want to do it, but I also like didn't know what else to do, and I was like, whatever, I'll just do it. And then I was really procrastinating on applying to jobs and just didn't want to do it. And I was like, but I didn't want to think about like why I didn't want to do it or why I didn't feel excited about it, because I really didn't have anything else that I was super excited about. And then one weekend, it was back to March or April, I went to New York City for the weekend, and it was fun. I had a great time, but I also like was miserable at the same time, and was just like so anxious, thinking like, this is what my life is gonna be like. I don't know why, like I'm so anxious about this, like it just doesn't feel right. And then I got back that like Sunday night and went to Mass, and that was actually the night that Mark was like just gave like a very brief announcement about Catholic Volunteer Network, and had like the little booklets. And I really wasn't paying attention to it. I didn't think that a year of service was an option for me, because I had to kind of prepare myself financially for law school, and wanted to be able to save money and have like a good job. And so I still wasn't really paying attention to that announcement. But then it was like 1 o'clock at night, and I still couldn't fall asleep. And I just remember like I just kept thinking about this, like being so curious about like what the different options were. And I was like, maybe I can find a program in New York and like still live with my friends, like somehow do both. I don't know. I was just like so like unsure about what I wanted to do. And then I remember that night just like going through on the website, looking at all the different options, and I found CAP Corps that night, and was like, part of me like just felt so sure about it, which was so crazy, because for months I had been planning this, year of my life with my friends, and to suddenly feel so sure about it was a little bizarre, but like very special and like consoling, I think. So I still like, I had that moment of feeling sure about it, but then I was like, okay, whatever, I can't do that. Like it's not really an option for me. And I remember like talking to Corey about it and like being so stressed, and he was like, I feel like you've already decided though, like just do it. And I also remember going into the Judge Chapel, and I was praying with the Blessed Sacrament, and I feel like I'll never forget this moment. It's been like with me all year, that I just felt that God was telling me, we're doing this together, it's okay, like I'll be with you. And that's like something that has definitely like that God has continued to say to me, like through the struggles of this year, just like, it's okay, we're doing this together. And really, I think that was when I decided that my whole plan, like, of moving to New York City was totally something that I was doing on my own, and that I completely came up with, and I just really didn't feel any peace with it. And then with this, like, even though there were so many unknowns and I was so scared about like the financial part of it, the challenges of a year of service and being thrown into this community with strangers, I just felt like so much security at the same time, because I knew that this is what I was called to do, and that God was going to be with me. So yeah, I kind of wanted to give a reflection on what God has been showing me and how he's been showing up for me. And I think a good way to do that is just to tell a story about one interaction that I had with a guest at Miriam's Kitchen, the social services agency I work at. So just to allow you to kind of envision this in your heads, Miriam's Kitchen is like a huge dining room. So it's probably like double the size of this space, and there's just like tables all throughout. It's like very hectic, usually super crowded, and people are doing art or eating or just hanging out. And then there are offices around, but it's not like I'm just like sitting in my office all day, like taking appointments with people doing case management. I'm like walking around the dining room, like chatting with people, asking them how they're doing, and kind of like trying to do case management from there. And like sometimes, you know, then if it's like a more serious conversation or I need to use a computer or whatever, we'll go into an office together and like do that case management. But my day is like very free flowing, and like I have all different sorts of interactions with guests. So anyway, there's this one guest who I don't get to see very often. He's like comes in very sporadically, but for the sake of the story, I'll call him Ethan. And so I saw him. It was like 20 minutes before we were closing, and I like got excited because I hadn't talked to him in so long, and he came in. And like sometimes he comes in too and like won't talk to me. So he was like in a good mood and was like talking to me and updating me on his life. And the way that he speaks is like really hard to follow sometimes. And he just like has a lot going on, and is like dealing with like kind of trying to ignore internal stimuli. And so it was like hard to follow, but I was just trying to like hear like the updates of his life. And in the back of my mind, I had this like mental checklist of like, okay, I remember last time that I spoke with him, he was telling me that like his Medicaid got turned off, and like I know we need to work on recertifying that. I want to talk to him about like what's going on with his housing case manager, because I know that he has an apartment but he hasn't been staying there, and I want to figure out why. Just like had all like my own list of like what I wanted to work on. But as a case manager, I'm not supposed to like tell him what he needs to work on. I'm supposed to like ask him what his goals are and like how I can support him and empower him to do what he wants to do. So I was like trying to listen to him, and I kept asking him like, okay, like you have some time now, like I'm free, like what do you want to work on? What are your goals? And he just like kept like ignoring that question and whatever, was just chatting with me. And then finally he was like, okay, like I want to work with you, like let's go to an office. And at this point it was like 10 minutes until we were closed, and I was like, okay, like maybe I could like fill out the application really quick. But we sat down in the office, and I said, okay, like what do you want to work on? And he was just silent. Like like I said, the way that he talks is like very like hectic, like he's very like speaks very fast. And he was like suddenly very silent. He was looking down. He like had something in his hands, like a pen or something that he was kind of like fiddling with. And I was like trying really hard to be a good case manager and just let him like sit and think, even though I was like stressed about like we're about to close and I want to do these things. And it felt like forever. It was probably like 3 or 4 minutes that he was totally silent and just thinking. And then he looks up at me and like makes very direct eye contact, which like he also doesn't do very often. And he just says, I want to be kind, generous, and respectful. And I was like, I like didn't know what to say. Like I remember just being like trying to respond and like keep the conversation going. And I was just like blown away by his response and how I just felt like so kind of at the same time like honored that he would share that with me, but also completely unqualified to be the one to like help him with those goals. I'm like, that's like great, like yeah, like great goals, but like what, like I don't know, like I can't, this is not like a easy like benefits recertification application that I can fill out for you, you know? And yeah, I was just really struck in that moment, and I continue to go back to it because I think there's so much to see there in just the humanity that he brought to our interaction and that he pulled out of me, that I kind of had this orientation toward him of like, I can help you with these things, and like this is what we need to do. And then he was just kind of like, I'm not worried about that. Like this is what's important. And like in order for me to continue that conversation with him, like I had to bring my whole self to it. I had to recognize that, like, okay, like this isn't, I can't bring him like a very specific skill set. But I need to like bring my like human understanding of that I can see like this is kind of what we all want, right? To know how to love each other and to be in community with others. And I could just see that like that's what he was longing for, and that he saw in himself like I want to love well, and that's what's gonna really like change my situation. Yeah, so as I've reflected kind of on this this interaction and what God has been trying to show me through it, I think so. There's 4 pillars of CapCore: intentional community, service, prayer, and simplicity. And I was really reflecting on how I think this, I could talk about all 4 with these, but it really, like 2 of them really stand out. One is service and one is simplicity. I've really had to really adjust like what my perspective on a year of service. Because I was like, well, yeah, like I can give my time, like I can give my education, my skill set, like I can do this. But I've noticed that what like true service to our guests is really just showing up for them and giving of my whole self. I can't go into an engagement and say, yeah, like you can tell me about like what your struggles are, and I'll just like listen and then categorize them into like a checklist of things that we can get done, because that's where I feel comfortable, and that's like where I feel that I can do more like, yeah, like targeted, like non-vulnerable work. I've been really like pushed by, I think, my coworkers and by the guests themselves, that they're like, no, like be real with me. Like, what do you think about this? Like, we're 2 people here and I'm telling you this. And like, yeah, like what do you, like kind of them demanding like that humanity from me, and demanding that like I bring my whole self to it. I feel like that day with Ethan, I had to, eventually I responded, and like we kind of got into this very short conversation, because I think after he said it, he was like a little bit like shocked too that he said it, and was kind of like, okay, like over it, and like was gonna leave. But yeah, I just asked him like where that was coming from and what he meant by it, and just like genuinely like trying to learn from him about what that meant to him. And he gave me like, kind of like brushed it off too. He like wasn't willing to talk to it about it more. But he really he really just showed me his own humanity and, yeah, like I said, like demand in mind from it. So that was like something that I'm still learning about service and about the work that I do, that it's not so simple. And that also there's been a similar lesson for me with learning about simplicity. So this program, like I said, is like run by the Capuchin Franciscans, and some of you might be familiar with Franciscan spirituality. It's like very focused on simple living. Like some, like the CFRs, like don't have, like some of them are even known to like beg on the streets. Like it's this very like intense focus on material simplicity and relying on others. And I was like totally prepared for that going in. I was like, I know we have like a very small budget. We're gonna have to be really careful about like we can't really eat out in Washington, D.C. And I was just like very, I guess, like prepared for that material simplicity aspect of it. And it's been such a blessing, really, that has been part of the teachings of Franciscan spirituality. But something that has been a lot more impactful for me is thinking about internal spirituality. And this is actually something that one of the brothers talked about during our orientation, about how he practices Franciscan spirituality, is really this like clearing out of all of the things that like you think of as like yourself, but that are not like your true self. So he was talking about trying to like clear away the fears and anxieties and like material, like superficial desires. And that doesn't necessarily mean like wanting things that you can touch, but like wanting approval, or wanting like being like hyper fixated on like a certain goal that is maybe like coming out of like a desire to be praised rather than like to follow a true calling. Kind of like internal simplicity, which has been like so fascinating for me to try to wrap my head around. I think it's like a very complex thing to actually live out. But I was just thinking about it more with that interaction with Ethan, that I was so concerned about like all of these different things that he needed to get done. And I'm not trying to like downplay that like he needs to like get out of his like physical situation, like he needs to like be more like physically well. But I feel like he was able to kind of like clear all of that away for a moment. And when I asked him like what he really wants, what his real goals are, like those were his goals. He wants to be kind, generous, and respectful. And I think like that was just so impactful for me, and like helped me understand that simplicity more, of thinking about like what are we really doing, and like who are we really. And that's something that I try to bring to more of my engagements with clients now, of just thinking about like who am I and who are you, and like we're two people like really on the same level. And like when you think about like it in that more simple way, I feel like there's just so much more space after you clear everything away to like have that deeper interaction. Yeah, hopefully that makes sense. I know it's like I'm still processing through all of this that I'm learning as well, and it's kind of like a complex thing. But yeah, so that's kind of what I learned from like my interaction with Ethan, and I feel like I'm still learning every day from all of the guests and from my housemates. And yeah, just this like giving of yourself, which is like really difficult for me personally too, because I think it's like I'm just a very independent person, and I feel like that's something that I've really had to learn in community life, of like, so I like talked a little bit about how like giving to myself and like my engagements with clients, but like I also see it in my community life, that it's not just like those sacrifices that I make of like doing the dishes when it's someone else's turn, or like going and like picking someone up from the metro station when like I'd rather do my own thing. Like those are very like valid ways to like do intentional community and like give of your time and of your skills, but it's really been kind of like pushing myself to bring my whole self to the community, meaning like sharing what's really going on at work and like my struggles and joys at work, what's really going on in my prayer life. Like I've been so blessed by our times of nightly prayer where like I feel like my housemates will bring like different things that God has been teaching them or different prayers, and it's like exactly what I need to hear in that moment. And if they hadn't been willing to like be honest with the community and like bring something real to that prayer time, then we never would have been able to like get that experience. Yeah, so I think that has been like the main thing that I've kind of been learning and I'm like still growing in. I just wanted to share that with you as something a way to encourage you guys to think about the possibility of a year of service and all of the growth that is possible in it, but also something that you can bring to your day-to-day lives at Colgate and think about how to live in simplicity, like inner simplicity, and how to bring your whole selves to your communities and to your work and to your friendships. Yeah, it's something that I'm still trying to figure out, but that has been really a positive thing for me. Yeah.